Yeah, my name is Ahmad Azarkani, and my better business half, Khalid Al-Hadji. So we've been doing commercial real estate for better part of 2 years. We started in the residential landscape, and we made a full transition within the last 2 years. So this is our third full year, and it's been a pleasure just being part of Samson. It's really given us a platform to do this and be able to grow our team, and now we have a goal of expanding our team over the next year. So a special thank you to Mike Briggs for being our number one fan. He's always reachable, and any question we have, we always go to Mike. Aladdin as well is always communicative, and any question we have from a commercial perspective, Aladdin's always there for us, as well as obviously Danny. Sorry. So that's a little bit about me. Khalid, if you want to.
Yeah, so just to kind of piggyback, we came from a similar background to you guys. We are residential. In residential, we never really hit our stride. We were doing okay. We were happy with the income we were making per se, but we didn't never really hit those major goals for us. So we come from a very similar background in residential, and then he had a phone call. He's like, "Hey, I can help you get a daycare," and that was November 2022. That January, we decided to go into commercial full time, and that's just been our transition. So we are 100% no longer doing any residential period, and we've been able to fully transition. So it's been a great start for us, and we wanted to share that with you guys. Again, Samson has been our biggest supporter. We love the referrals. We love being able to just help you guys out with any documents, questions, and just give you those resources as a team here at Samson.
I think that's what kind of inspired us to do this. We get a fair amount of calls from our fellow Samson colleagues that are asking fairly basic questions from a commercial perspective. So we worked with Mike on this about doing a quarterly seminar approach to commercial real estate for folks that are committed to residential but might have a client or two throughout the year that they can benefit from these courses. So without further ado, I think we can get right into it. This one is CRE 101. So we're going to be discussing basically different property types, a little about due diligence that you would do with a clientele that you'll be approaching, whether they're a tenant, a buyer, or a investor, and so on. So we can.
So we've already kind of discussed a little bit about us on the personal side.
Beautiful faces there.
On the personal side, father of three. I have two twin girls that are 3 years old. I have a 5-year-old. So kind of young family. We're both kind of working at it. Between us, we have. Well, he's got one on the way, so we'll have 6 kids between us. So full definitely house. Busy, full houses. And again, he comes from a background in dealership. I came from a background in retail sales, long time ago. So we decided to join together as a team, residential at first, and then we transitioned to commercial, and now we're kind of moving forward with that. So, do you want to start?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Right. So what is commercial real estate? So anything that's really not residential. So I would really start from the beginning. A lot of people look at multifamily. That's the easiest one to tell you. If it's 4 units or less, it's residential. If it's 5 or more units, it's going to be commercial. And then everything else is pretty much commercial. One thing that I think classifies commercial as well is land for us, because we take a look at land development. So you might be selling a single lot for a residential, one residential build. That would be, I would consider that more residential, but everything else, if you're going to be building multiple lots, I would consider that as being commercial. But you do have industrial, you do have retail, you have flex space. You have a lot of these things that go into it, including businesses. So one thing that we'll go through here is business and income generation. So people are going to be looking at it as a investment property. You're going to have owner users, and then you're going to have people that are going to also just come into the space as tenants. So that's a little bit of who the profile of the 3 categories that you'll see looking for commercial space. You want to take the rest?
Yeah, so I think Khalid touched on this a little bit. So there's 6 different classes that you'll see in commercial real estate. So office, and that can be broken down based on the class type. So you have Class A, Class B, Class C, based on the location, based on the condition of the property, how old it is. You'll have retail that also falls within that kind of subjective view of class rating. based on location, age, whatnot. Multifamily, Khalid touched on that. So apartment buildings, high-rise residential buildings as well. Industrial, very interesting one in our area here. Prices have just skyrocketed over the last 3 years overall, but particularly in industrial with all the data centers that are coming in. So data center space, distribution and logistics, warehousing, manufacturing, that kind of stuff. Hospitality.
I think you can.
Hospitality are going to be like your hotels, your daycares, self-storage facilities, medical offices, resorts. You probably don't come across in this area that much special use, but it's there. And then the land is going to be, raw land that you can look at a raw land site and help a developer get it all the way through entitlement and through a development process. So these can get a little bit more complicated.
Well, one thing I'd like to add for hospitality and special purpose. So probably the number one thing that we get a question from agents is for special purpose churches, mosques, synagogues, whatever. We probably get a call at least once to twice a month about, hey, do you have any space for a congregation? They have 100 people. The complexities of dealing with church space specifically are tenfold, right? They're nonprofits. Typically, their income and their cash flow is not great. But even if they are, their requirements and how you view it, and this is why it's considered special purpose, right? It is a building, but there's special purposes to it. You need large assembly space. You need a lot of parking. You need more bathrooms. So that's kind of what makes special purpose, because a building could be a church, right? But also, what are the other requirements that would make this church actually work? And a lot of times what you'll find with special purpose buildings, they are a special exception. So even if it is permitted by right typically, or in certain zonings, a lot of other zonings will allow it, but only with a special exemption. So it just takes a lot more legwork and a lot more know-how to get a deal like that through.
Yeah,
I know I just spoke a lot. Go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, so building class, honestly, when it comes to building class, some of it is subjective. It's a bit of a work of art. Your class A is typically going to be premium properties that are newer built, so within the last 10, 15, 20 years. They're going to provide really good amenities. So think of office building, they'll have elevators. They might have like a conference room that you can rent out. They'll have maybe a coffee shop. They'll be offering amenities that are going to draw a higher per square foot rate for that building. When you get into Class B, it's kind of like a middle point. They might be a little bit older than 20 years. Maybe they'll have an elevator, maybe they won't. But they'll generally not be as amenity heavy as some of these newer builds. And Class C is going to be your 40, 50-year-old buildings, brownstone buildings. So think a lot of the office in Manassas, for example, a lot of it is like brownstone, so a little older. They're maybe more condo focused. And generally they won't have the amenities like elevators and whatnot. And this will be across different class of real estate. So retail, you can kind of look at it from the same perspective. Some of these newer town centers that might have a Whole Foods or whatnot, maybe a mixed use, that'll be more Class A. When you get down to Class C, it'll be more of like the retail strip centers that are more neighborhood focused. And again, this is kind of across the board for industrial, even special purpose. You can look at it the same way.
All right, so with retail spaces specifically, we have kind of 4 general categories. So the first is shopping centers. The best ones right now are, if you guys are familiar with Woodbridge, Stonebridge shopping center. That's what we call a mixed-use retail, office, and condo. Reston Town Center is probably the premier example in our area of just, I don't know how many acres it is. I think it's over 60 acres, maybe over 100.
Yeah.
But they have 100,000 plus square feet of office, several hundred units of multifamily, so those are apartment units. And then they have the shopping, the entertainment, the food, everything is right there.
Walkable.
It's walkable. It's right next to a metro station. So that's been basically Class A retail space. Now, Reston Town Center, and actually areas around Reston Town Center, typically we're seeing them around $60 to $65 a square foot. Reston Town Center specifically, I think, is closer to 85.
Yeah, and plus, now it's $80, $90, $100 a square foot that we're seeing in some of these Class A spaces.
I can tell you, Tyson's One, the mall, some of those spaces are at $300+ a square foot. So really the location and the level of quality from these spaces is what really takes you from Class A to Class B to Class C. But that's kind of the premier type of shopping center that you'll see. Then you'll have kind of what we call lifestyle. So those are still fairly large shopping centers where they, well trafficked, but they don't necessarily have that kind of that premier, or people are going to be traveling to these places from 30, 40, 50 minutes away. But they're still very good regional spaces. You have strip malls. Now, strip malls are really just going to be anything on the side of a road, small strip. Usually you'll see anywhere from 2 to even 10 stores in a strip. Route 1, Route 28, Route 50, you'll have those. And they could be really great. So what we found is that this is really great for our restaurants, for our cafes, these spaces that are right off a main road, and people really love to just kind of stop by in their neighborhoods. And then you have standalone stores. Standalone stores are really great for especially people that are building out a new concept, and they want to build out that concept the same way every single place. This could be a really great one. This could also work for people that just need parking. So these are generally the type of spaces that you'll see when it comes to retail.
Yeah. Standalone examples of those are a lot of the national franchises. They're usually in like drive-throughs, for example. Those are considered standalone retail. A lot of banks have standalone retail. They're generally more expensive to build, per square foot. They net more for the developer. So yeah, you'll see those as well.
A lot of times, actually, they're built to suit, and they'll have a really high lease to begin with and escalations. So a lot of times you'll see banks that are shut down, and they can't sell them because years later, the rent that they got and the value that the property was at the highest, they can't recoup that. So you'll see that quite a bit with banks.
With multifamily, just to go over briefly, I mean, they'll be from high rises, 10 plus stories. So you'll see that in downtown DC. You're seeing a lot of them pop up with the mixed use development. So a lot of these developers now are bringing products like residential complexes that are 300, 400, 500 units residential, plus 1 million square feet of retail, creating that kind of town center complex, and then some office use. So you'll see that in centers, downtown centers. Mid-rise, 4 to 9 stories. They're more urban, suburban style. Garden style are kind of, I would say they're probably going to the wayside now, right? With the density kind of going up.
So I'd actually disagree with them. What we see with garden style is that the cost to build high rises, mid-rise or high rise, because they typically, after 4 stories, you want to build with concrete. You typically see a lower cost at the garden style. So you'll see them take 10 acres, put in 300 units, but they keep it typically below 5 stories, so that they can make the cost work out. So I actually think that they're really in demand. It's probably the number one style, especially like I would say further south from this area. But that's typically what we're seeing.
Yeah, so these will be also like regionally dependent. Townhouse portfolio, so think one single investment property, and your client has 50 of these in a particular region. That would be considered a commercial sale because you're selling a portfolio. Yeah. So we'll fall under multifamily.
So industrial properties, this is probably my favorite, and this is actually where we found a lot of our success. So warehouses, very simple, big open spaces. Here, what's important is how far are the columns? How high is the space? Does this client need racking? Do they need, it could be their sprinkler system needs to be at a certain level. How much power do they need? So those are the types of things that we're looking for warehouse spaces. One of the biggest calls that we're getting is pickleball. Where can we put a pickleball court? Now, 90% of warehouse space isn't going to work. It's a lot of times, 90% of the times, the columns are too close to each other. So that's a lot, which you'll find. Also, I don't think they're financially feasible as a personal opinion. Manufacturing facilities, again, this is where you're going to find power is probably the biggest concern, and then space, the amount of space that you can get. Distribution centers, that's actually what we're seeing mostly in this area. So Chantilly, and I would say the Manassas corridor, so that Route 28 corridor up to Route 50, what we're seeing is a lot of distribution. And the other thing that we're seeing is data centers, which is one of the other product categories. But these are places that are going to be like Amazon, UPS, FedEx. So you'll see a lot of those buyers, and then you'll see smaller companies that are kind of last mile shipping, and just smaller facilities overall. Flex spaces, this is everything from an auto shop, where they just need 4,000 to 5,000 square feet, to people that have a mixture of office space and warehousing space. So you'll actually find this a lot with contractors. They need both. They need base of operations, and they actually need space to store stuff. You have outdoor storage. Out of everything here, this is probably my favorite because it's super easy to develop. As long as the zoning allows it, or you can get through the zoning, all you need to do is put up a fence, rent out the space, and it's very low cost. You generate a lot of NOI. That NOI literally translates directly into a higher value for the property, because that's how commercial properties are valued, and we'll get to that at a later stage.
Yeah. A lot of demand for outdoor right now.
Yeah.
Lots of demand.
Now, data centers. The reason that everything here is doing well is because of data centers. Data centers have taken up the vast majority of any developable industrial land in the area. So this is what we're seeing here is data centers are the king. They're the behemoth. They're paying anywhere from $1.8 million to $2.2 million, $2.4 million an acre, depending on the location. So that's just for raw land. So that's what they're going to pay. And then from there, because of how much they're paying for land, it made industrial outdoor storage expensive. It makes everything else expensive, because if they're willing to pay $2.2 million, the numbers don't work for a warehouse developer that's going to only pay $1 million. So we're seeing a huge trend because of that. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, some of our biggest success stories, period, have been because of this, and in the industrial space. We actually met with a client, just to give a bit of a story. 2 weeks ago, we were having lunch with him, and he had bought 20 acres, him and his partner, way back when on Balsford. So if you guys know, that entire 2,400 acre site's now going to be all data. It's right in my backyard too. It's kind of sucks, but it's good for business. But 20 acres that he bought for $100,000, and he sold it within the last year or two for $62 million. So $2.4 million or $2.5 million an acre that he was able to get for the site. Crazy. And he was like, this is God's gift. I'll never repeat this again. One-time deal. Yeah, so folks got lucky. We have another client now that bought 110 acres. That was agricultural. But he bought it for $1 million for his church. And he's going to be able to get it through the rezoning process. We connected him with a developer that'll help him do that at $500,000 an acre. So, there's stories like this just because of what data centers have been bringing to the table. Real quick, just to go back to flex space. So a lot of times, like when you're working with, from a tenant rep perspective, with people that are looking for maybe contractor space, sometimes even retail. It's in the name flex because it allows for retail, office, and warehouse use by zoning. So in flex spaces, you'll be able to use 40% of that space for retail. So someone can come in, set up a retail footprint within his shop, and still have the warehouse and the back to support that operation. Flex is nice, and you'll see a lot of it in Fairfax and Loudoun. Land development, I'll let you handle this one because we've been working some good deals on this one.
So raw land. Raw land is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically on land, virgin land. It hasn't been touched. So when you're taking a look at that, that's going to have the least amount of value, right? There's two things that you can do to a property. You can go through the legal or the entitlement process of things, and then you can also do the physical improvements to the site. When it's raw land, neither of those things have typically been done. So that's going to hold the lowest value, but that's where the greatest opportunity is. If you can get in on something that someone hasn't really taken the time or effort to go through and do the work themselves, you can get in. Most of the properties that we're seeing that go from 100K valuation to $1 million valuation is agricultural land. That's actually been probably the vast majority of where we see rezonings happening, and that's what entitled land is. Entitled lands means that you've taken it through rezoning and now it's entitled for this use. So again, this project that it's 110 acres that we're working on, 30 of those acres is going to go to our buyer, and then he's going to help him develop the other 50 or so 80. There's 80, but 30 of it is going to be for a church, all right? And then that 50 is also going to be developed into a second stage of warehouse. There's other properties where you're taking 30 acres and now you're going to develop it into a housing community, and it's going to be 350 homes, right? So that's where you go from raw land to entitlement. Now, developers, 90% of the time, all they do is just the paperwork, right? Now, that paperwork is very expensive. Okay, on average, you're probably, for let's say a 30-acre lot, you're going to spend anywhere from $1 to $2 million. So if you don't have that, you really need to partner with the right people that can get you through that. And there's so many pitfalls that experience is probably the number one most important factor when it comes to this. Yep. You need to have the right experience, the right team to take you from raw land to entitlement. Frankly, taking a bulldozer, clearing the land, that's the easy part. This is the hard part, and this is where most people fail. Again, that takes us to entitled land. If you can change the zoning, you increase the value and you can just sell it, or you can at that point go and actually develop it yourself physically. Infill developments are developments such as, think of a 3-story home in Arlington that the zoning's been changed. It's right in the middle of the city, and now it's going to be developed into a high-rise. It could be a third of an acre lot, but now it's going to be a high-rise. It's infill because it's being infilled within a city or within an area that's already highly developed. And then adaptive reuse, you'll also see this quite a bit in Arlington. I think we're going to see a lot more of this in Fairfax. We have a lot of office vacancy. They're going to try to convert the office to apartments. Mm. So that's a little bit of land. Land is probably one of the most complicated portions of commercial real estate.
Yeah. And this is where, if you're looking at it from a macro perspective, this is where the pipeline starts for a lot of the commercial that's going to be coming over the next 30, 40, 50 years sometimes. It starts here. And the reason why developers make boku bucks is because they take a lot of risk on a site. And we've seen this before, where we put a piece of land under contract for a client. They spent $40,000, $50,000 just on some feasibility. And they come to find out, oh, this site won't work for us. So sometimes they'll spend $1 million trying to get it through entitlement. And once they get to a public hearing, the neighbors don't want this anymore. And now they're down $1 million. And it takes 18 months to get to that point. This is not a simple process. So a lot of these housing developments that you're seeing coming up, it's been years in the making. And after a public hearing, they're still 2, 3, 4 years sometimes before they even break ground and start delivering houses for folks.
The average time from conception to breaking ground is 4 years. So that's basically what's holding up the entire housing market in our area especially.
Yeah. So you'll see a lot of developers are involved in politics, because if you know the supervisors well and you know your local politicians, you can get your projects pushed through. You can influence this process so that it doesn't take as long as it doesn't need to, honestly, sometimes. For adaptive reuse, just to add on to what Khalid was saying earlier, with the empty offices, in DC particularly, the city is designating 14% of empty offices towards getting redeveloped as multifamily. So we're going to see a lot more of that now with all this empty office that's coming up.